Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, where the inner warrior shines in his light. Now, today I get the honor of a fellow podcaster, Nick Goblirsch. Nick is a former HR executive turned entrepreneur. He also is now owner of a paint company, and he is just an all-around great individual that I really am excited to talk about. So he's going to sound better than I am because he's professionally mic'd up. I'm at
You
this
sound
end of the
great.
world.
You
Yeah.
sound great.
Nick, I do appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for joining
Thank you.
me, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very, very excited. Very, very excited to be on your show. This is going to be fun.
So you were telling me off camera some of your joys of life, which was, firing people, which is what HR
Oh,
loves
it's
to
such a
do.
shame. It's your listeners hearing that. Like, oh my God, that was on the tail end of like a
Yeah.
20-minute conversation.
Yeah, well, but you admitted that you're good at it. So,
Yeah.
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Monmouth County, New Jersey. That's when they say there's a North Jersey and a South Jersey, and they say there's no Central Jersey. That's pretty much if you drew a line through the state, that would be kind of Jersey kind of looks like a man hunched over. That would be like the shoulder right on the
Okay.
shore. I grew up in a shore town. I didn't really understand what a shore town was until I moved to South Jersey and visited the beaches here and realized how many people come here. I didn't really understand why people came to where I lived every year. I just assumed that it was just close. We were closer to New York, so people would come from New York, where I live now in South Jersey. People from Philadelphia come all the way down here. Up there, we call them bennies, and down here they call them shoebies, which is weird.
Yeah.
I went went to Catholic school my entire, I guess, scholastic career. I graduated in 1994, and then pursued an art degree. And then my minor was in radio and video. So, Daryl, it's not like I've been playing with tape decks and
Yeah.
video cameras, forever. So
The old reel to reel stuff.
yeah, I did use it in radio. I did have a test where it was a 10-question test. If I could go back, I'd crush it, but I didn't take it seriously, so I never really practiced. We had to do 10 things uh, within a certain time period, and I got out of the 10, I did 4 right out of the 10, which is such a shame because I could probably do all that with my eyes closed. But the technology was old and everything. Now you just probably go on a computer and do all that. But I've always a big have been a big proponent in my life of finding joy in what I do. And sometimes we can pick the paths we're on, and sometimes we can't pick the paths we're on. But as a kid, I was always diving into doing things that were fun, like really fun. So drawing was fun for me, even though I was a pretty dedicated student when I studied. I was AP calculus, honors physics, I was in all the smarty pants classes. I was always in classes with kids above me, which happened a lot in Catholic school. And some of more of the hefty math classes, they didn't have a whole separate class for honors. They just stuck you in with the class above you.
Hmm.
And I always used what I did as for fun, as an escape from everything that I had to do. Right. And even when I worked one thing that was really great, probably the first taste I had was as a kid. I grew up being on a shore town. There was a shopping center not too far from the beach. And my close friend, Tony, who I'm excited I'm going to get to see this weekend at my daughter's graduation party. I haven't seen him in a bit. He and I worked at a pharmacy, and it sold beach supplies, like towels,
Hmm.
chairs, sunscreen, all that stuff, because it was so close to the beach. And what was great, it was kind of the best of both worlds. Not only was I working, which I know we all have to do in order to provide for ourselves, and I was with my friends. I grew up in an apartment complex. We had one giant pool that we all hung out with over the summer, and those people are like he's my friend Tony's he's my brother. I mean, anything he needs, I've been in touch with him. I don't. It's weird. I don't know if you agree with me on this, Daryl. I don't know if it's a man thing or something, but on how we socialize versus women. Uh, I have a lot. It's ironic that I have a lot more women friends than men.
Yes.
However, the men friends that I have, the relationships are so intimate. They're so tight that even though I might not be able to or talk to my friend in 9 months, if he gives me a call, this is what I need. I'm immediately in a car
Yep.
driving to his house. Man,
Mhm.
there's such a comfort in that. My
Yeah,
loyalty in that. So that's
absolutely.
in a nutshell. That was pretty much where I grew up, and eventually going to college. That's when I studied art and then did a little radio and video on the side.
Well, you're fascinating to me because, as I mentioned, my background's in psychology, so I love the brain, and I'm kind of like you, where I'm good at both sides of the brain. Most people are one
Yeah,
or
one or
the
the other.
other. Few of us are both. And I actually used to own a graphic design company, but
Very
I'm
cool.
really good at math and psychology. But you did the same. In my experience, um, especially growing up in a Catholic environment,
Hmm.
the art part of life isn't typically encouraged. Was it different in your household? Did they encourage you to do that?
I can't remember the comic strip. I actually ripped it out. There's a trunk downstairs that when for those listening that are getting ready to send your kids off to college, let's say for your first year, that's when you go and you break the bank buying everything you think they need in their dorm room. And I think back then, I don't know if it was Kmart, it might have been Kmart sold these trunks that had locks on them and everything. I don't think we ever locked them. And downstairs is a comic strip that I don't know if I got like while I was in college of a family. Oh, for better for worse. I don't know. Again, I'm totally dating myself. And
That's
these
okay.
awesome comic strips are actually in the
In
newspaper.
papers, yeah.
But it has a kid getting accepted to college. Hey, you're going to study art, and they're like, yay! And then the second panel is of him graduating, going, what are you going to do? Now, I could tell you that my senior year, that's when they announced graphic design as a major in my college, even though they built the art building, the fine arts building when I was a freshman. So it's not even the same building anymore, but that's where my senior exhibits were, my student exhibits were, my studios were that I went to. We were using Photoshop 2, which was crazy on really old Macs. And they would tell you, make sure you save them all the time because the 2 megabytes of RAM, it's computer probably going to crash.
Right.
So when I graduated, I didn't really know my aspirations. Ironically, if anyone sees me on LinkedIn and see what I've done over the last 25 years, there's a uh, there's such a difference between what I have done than what I actually have um, wanted to do when I graduated. Like my aspirations when I graduated college were simply I wanted because they had these things called juried shows, Daryl.
Mm.
So juried shows were these art shows where you would put in. I was a sculptor, so I would put pieces in, and what they would do is a jury would go around and they would choose a winner, and you would get clout with that, and maybe you'd get enough clout where you would actually get to have your stuff exhibited in the studio. My sister had moved out; she had moved north with her fiance at the time, and I lived in an apartment, very small apartment, but I turned her bedroom into my studio. So that was awesome. Like I had a place to sculpt. I made a lot of big things. And that was it. I thought I'd deliver pizzas during the week or find a day job. And then I would work at nights and then exhibit on the weekends. And that's it. That's it. But the best thing I discovered in college was I met my wife at the time, who kind of talked a little bit of sense in me. The only difference is I thought, well, I can figure this out. If I need to get a bigger job, then let me look and let me try to find something that's close to art. And I stumbled across an ad that said that this company was involved in advertising and sales. We could teach you how to be a leader and all this stuff and manage people. And little did I know, 2 years in, it was one of these multi-level marketing companies. And I actually did a whole series, a 3 episode series on a former podcast about my from interview all the way to the time I quit over those 2 years. I mean, I lived in like 5 different states. I weighed about I didn't make any money because I couldn't sell, so I didn't really eat. But one thing I was really good when I worked for this company is I could teach people how to sell or teach them, I guess, to teach them to find the confidence to do what the company asked you to do. And I always had people with low confidence with me. My team was full of people that just needed to be boosted. And I didn't really quite understand that was the universe kind of giving me a sign that, hey, Nick, this may be your calling, that there are people out there, and I was an insecure teen, there may be people out there that need the same help that you need. So what can you do to pay it forward? And I got a taste for actually helping people. Now, mind you, it didn't make me the millions that the company's owners said it would make you.
Yeah.
And I absolutely failed, but realized that maybe I have a knack for dealing with people a little bit more than I thought. And maybe there's something to this. So then in like 2000, my wife flies all the way out to Chicago. I was living in Darien, Illinois at the time. Flies out to Chicago to basically do, and we talked about it. Her mom said, either you're going to find out you're going to be with him or you're not going to be with him. And then I found out my mother-in-law was already prepared on me moving in with them, which I had no idea. I remember even making that phone call and being like, hey, can I stay with you guys? And then in 2000, I moved in with my wife at the time, or girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife and the mother of my children. And that was very hard for her. Again, something we shared on my former podcast. So great. It's called the Dependent Independent Podcast. It's still out there. It was such a great cathartic way of expressing how I was kind of growing up and approaching my 40s. And from that, my father-in-law was a plumbing inspector in Atlantic City. And he said, what did you do when I was working at a movie theater at the time too? Because I worked in a theater in college. So that was kind of a way to make enough money that I could pay my in-laws for all the food that I was eating. And my father-in-law said, what did you do in your former job? I said, well, I kind of interviewed people because we had to like interview salespeople to build our teams. And he says, well, they have this thing in Atlantic City and the casinos called HR, and they interview people. It's like, cool, you know? So I started on one end of the island and started applying for work, or jobs. Finally got to the middle of the island, went for a typing test at one of the casinos, and they hired me on the spot. And then I kind of learned a little bit from that sales company of acting as if. Do you ever see the movie Boiler Room, by the way?
Yes.
That was a movie that they didn't want anyone to see when I worked for that sales company, but it was almost the same thing. Like there's a scene where Ben Affleck, everyone's at his house and they're watching Wall Street.
Yes.
And the house is empty, right? And one kid says, oh, are they moving? Is he getting furniture? He goes, no, he's lived here for like a year. That's how our houses were. Like we just moved to like cities, opened up offices and that's all we did was work like 7 days a week. I didn't have time to stay home. I don't remember even watching TV for like 2 years. And that was the life. That was the idea. So anyway, my skills were in interviewing because I was a terrible salesman. So I thought if I can interview more people, I can get people to do what I can't do. So when I went for the typing test and I got the job, just like they say in Boiler Room, act as if, I just started acting as if. I wore a suit every day. I presented well. I would go out of my way to get to know different types of managers, to figure out, as a person who took applications, where do I send certain candidates for the job, for some of the job requisitions that they had. And when you step out of your comfort zone and you do things that people don't expect you to do, but in line with what would be normal, obviously, I don't mean, going completely out of left field, you start standing out. So suddenly I go from the guy who had really no aspirations at all, worked in a movie theater. Now I'm working in a casino, with health benefits and things like that, which I didn't have. And I was 22 or 23 at the time. Suddenly I have casinos looking for me, like people actually seeking me out. And suddenly I'm being asked to interview at other casinos. So that was fun. Like that's fun, going to like a bar and having people come up to you like you don't even expect, asking you questions about what you're capable of. And from there, my career just started catapulting in looking at a position and saying, what else could this job do? And then even halfway through my career, leading to a point where I started getting jobs that weren't just created, where it was my job to make the job what it is. I would probably go back. If I was to go back in that part of my career, I'd probably give myself some advice about how to do that. Sometimes that too much freedom is not really a good thing, because sometimes your expectations of that job might not be the same as what they're telling you. Even though they give you all that freedom to invent it, you may not be knocking out of the park when you could be. And then, as we were talking about before we turned the mics hot, I was always of the mind that if you do a job that people don't want to do, think about it, even knocking on doors, sweeping popcorn in a movie theater, taking applicants in the casinos in Atlantic City, people and stepping out of your comfort zone and figuring out what else can I do to to make this job or even and back to what I said before about serving others. Like, what can I do more to service and serve the people I staff for, or the patrons that come into the theater and want a better experience? How can I help them? That starts somewhat defining what you could do, and especially giving you the courage to do the jobs that people don't want to do. So about probably 2/3 in my career, or even around the kind of late 2000s, I worked for a female apparel company, a clothing company during the recession. And to kind of give you kind of a nutshell, what happened, the company was doing amazing and then eventually got sold, like biggest female apparel company in the world, and then eventually gets sold. But during that process, I learned a lot about change, especially change when it's happening when things aren't going the way you want them to, on how you can keep your chin up and figure out a way to accomplish your goals and make people feel good and energized, even when things are going absolutely in the toilet. I think one time I even talked to my vice president, person I reported to, his name was Steve, one of my managers there. And he said, I asked him a question. Like, I think I might have asked him for something. Like, God forbid you asked for something during a
Right.
time when the company's in the toilet and the share price is just dropping.
Yeah.
And he looks at me, he goes, Jesus Christ, he says, don't you know Rome is burning? And I didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
As time went on, I realized that even strengthened what we were doing. Then there was a few changes in the leadership team, and another vice president came in, Fred, very influential on my career, Fred Lamster, and he was amazing at empowering me and really tapping into what my strengths were, which really gave me the courage to not only do the things that people were uncomfortable doing, but also say the things that people were uncomfortable saying. So he was one of those catalysts to really put me in positions where I was able to say things at people that made 3 times as much money as I did, to tell them things that other people didn't have the courage to tell them. And in the midst of all this time, I was the person who organized mass layoffs and executed these layoffs, which you were graciously telling your audience
Of
when
course.
we started. But it wasn't so much I enjoyed that, because that really takes a toll on you. It's the idea that if you're going to deal with someone in their worst day, one of their worst days, what can you do to help them through that? And I got very, very good at understanding that, and understanding empathy, and strengthening my emotional intelligence, and really understanding what happens to me internally. Like, the first time I did it, I was a train wreck. The last time I did it, I was an absolute expert at it. And to this day, it's something that I miss, because I agree that I've worked with organizations in my career that try to do it on their own and deal with that type of change, and they're just not equipped. I think with change, with all those litany of pivots that I told you about, I got very, very good at understanding, yes, I need to make a decision to change, give myself permission to deal with all the stuff that comes with it, but see what happens and how I'll survive that, because I trust I will. My mother-in-law, when I left my corporate career in 2018 and was laid off from my last VP job and decided that I didn't want to do HR anymore, there was a lot of turbulence that happened, especially within my family, my friends around me, everyone. I mean, remember, I'm this guy who graduated with an art degree and took an HR rep job, taking applications in a casino, and turned it into a high 6-figure job in and doing very, very well. But also realizing that the only way to make more money is I could leave and find another job. My mother-in-law always said I was a hustler. Like, that's my mom. My mother-in-law is one of my most favorite people on the planet. But when she said that, it was so cool, because I think she felt the same way when I moved in with them, when I got my car repossessed out of their driveway, because my boss in the sales company was making payments, who I'm still friends with to this day. He was making payments for me. But when I quit the business and moved back to New Jersey from Chicago, it only took a certain amount, a couple of months before they came at my wife's home and took my car. That was awesome. It's so crazy. But it was a mistake. It was a thing I didn't realize. A responsibility I didn't understand. So then the latter part of my career, as I did that, I became someone who was very, very good at understanding how change happens. And I worked for companies, and they sought me out when they were going through massive changes. My last 2 jobs one was a new CEO, and the other one was a whole business model change that I came in. But change is sticky. change, I could tell you neither of them went the way I thought they would go. I was hired to do all the kind of the stuff again that no one wanted to do, and they paid me for it, the layoffs and the difficult conversations. But when it came to real positive change, Daryl, I think that's where that's where differences matter and count. And other than the company that was disappearing in the late 2000s, the female apparel company, that was a company that everyone was better when the company failed. And that, when I talk about this framework I put together this last year called the buckets of change, which is a kind of a way of navigating change, both internally, how we deal with change as people, but also how we deal with as teams and in organizations. All that knowledge came from that transition, which I tried to then emulate at almost every company I worked for. But unfortunately, that just doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't work, which is why I think there's such a big need for it. There's such a big need.
Absolutely. Here's a couple of things that parallel what you're talking about. When I was in my late 20s, I used to literally throw a dart at a map. Wherever it landed, that's where I would move. Every couple of years, I would just hit the dot. And at one point, I actually traveled from coast to coast, got in my car. This was well before cell phones and Google Maps. You had to actually break out a Rand McNally and find
Cool.
your way
Yeah.
around the country. And I went from coast to coast. My sister asked me once, aren't you kind of scared out there by yourself? Moving all the time. I'm like, nope, people are people. You treat them nice, they're going to treat you nice back. And it always stuck with me what Zig Ziglar said. He was one of the first self-help gurus back in the early days of that. But he said, if you help enough people get what they want, then you'll get what you want. And if you put service first and mentality first, it's all about building relationships. And when you have to go talk to, I don't care, the CEO or the janitor, you're not talking to them as the CEO or janitor. You're talking to them as the person, and you're finding that commonality as the person, and you're meeting them where they are as the person. So you can have those hard conversations. You can do those tough things. And when I was a sales rep for one of my companies, the manager came around and, did their little, let's shadow you for a day and see how you're doing, whatever, right? And we walk out of places and he'd be like, how can you possibly say those things to those people? Like, how do you get away with it? And I said, because I built enough rapport to be able to be honest with them. I can say what I can say because I've met them as a person, not just as an account, right? And I think that's what you were building to in your career. You were willing, somewhere in you, and this is what I want to find out, somewhere in you, you learned the integrity of doing the work and doing it well. And my dad always taught me, if you're painting the steps, paint both sides, no matter who can see it, because it's a matter of pride for yourself, right?
That's funny.
And that's how you take and tackle all of your businesses, right? You step in and do it with the integrity and service.
I think how we get there, right? It would be great to say, yes, I had a mentor that taught me all that, but a lot of it had to do with the relationship with my father and the distance we had in our relationship. My father, retired Army, spent 25 years in the service as an optometrist for the Army. He was stationed in Fort Monmouth, which is why we lived in Monmouth County. Wasn't around much. He wasn't. I mean, even though my father right now is like maybe 25 minutes away from where I am. I don't see him. I don't have a relationship with him, but I make sure his bills get paid. He's in a nursing home. My twin sister has a much better, she always had a better relationship with him. But as I grew, we all want I guess the encouragement and attention from our parents. Now, when I was a child, when my sister and I turned 6, my mother became ill very short period of time and actually passed from an aneurysm, which at the time they didn't have the technology to see that. Now, if you get a headache, Daryl, we could take you get an MRA and they'd be able to treat an aneurysm like that. But this was 1982 and the technology wasn't there. So my father didn't choose to take care of us. So my grandmother took us in, and that's where I really understood. She was very big in the church and it really taught my sister and I remember the day she taught us how to write our names, which was, I remember that day vividly, but was very big on teaching us manners and being polite and being kind. And one thing it's interesting, I'm painting for a family that has a son with autism. And my wife's been she graduated with special ed as a dual certified. And I've always been fascinated in truly being way more curious of understanding what makes people what they are, even though they're very different. Someone may be different. We're all different than each other, but what really makes us different? So my grandmother, I remember what she would do, which really helps me understand even how to ask questions in regards to my customer's son, who finally is talking to me. He finally talked to me today, which was great. And understanding also too, I'm in his space, and I'm rearranging things. So today I worked very, very hard to get one wall done in a room, even though I usually do the whole room, and then the opposite wall done so the couch can be put back and the TV can be put back up. All these things. But what my grandmother would do is we would walk around and she'd ask people, "Oh, may I ask why you?" I don't know if she said like, "Why are you in a wheelchair?" But she'd say to us, "That person's special." Because, and then we would just, okay, why are they special? We would ask, well, this is what they're dealing with, right? And it just changed the way I looked at people. I went from this 3 years of this time with my grandmother of really understanding and empathy and love and attention and kindness to then in a environment where it's just vacant. This dad wasn't around. We cooked for ourselves, cleaned for ourselves. I was 9 years old, going to a laundromat, doing my own laundry, cooking my own meals. So I think a lot of that way of what I do, and I'm dealing with it now, of really becoming a lot more self-aware. What triggers it is getting my dad's affection, like getting, and I could tell you, I've forgiven him on how he treated me and the things he said to me and whatever his parenting style was 10, 11, 12 years ago. And that took a huge weight off my chest of like, why be angry at somebody? He said, why? That doesn't do, I can't live my life. He never, and what do they say? Trauma doesn't have to be what happens to you. It can also be what doesn't happen to you. So there are times when that idea of serving others, I'm trying to get some type of not attention, because I don't think it's really attention seeking. I think it's validation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I have to keep in, like I keep in check. It's not a thing until it's a thing. Like and the reason why I was bringing this up is it's such a weird thing is I'm in these individuals' home, understand their son is in a space that he wants to feel comfortable with. And I'm impeding that, but very aware of it too. Like very aware. When I took that TV off the wall, Daryl, and I put it on his couch, and I knew it the moment I did it, just based on all the information and knowledge my wife has given to me and what we've observed through adults and children throughout the time we've known each other. I knew for a second. So I'm like, I know he's going to have a problem with that TV there. And they're great. They're like, no, this is great. It's a great opportunity for him to really understand how to deal with it. But I'm in their space, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And even though they're comfortable, they don't care how long I'm there and know I'm doing the job. I actually said to them today, I said, listen, I know this is not an issue, but I feel like sharing it. I feel anxious because I feel like I'm in your space. Like, and it's late. Like I work there. It's around the corner, which is great, by the way, because I paint in my town. I'm working a block and a half away. But the fact I was in that space, and it's that feeling I get, even though I'm serving them, I feel like I might be disappointing them, which is wrong. I know it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but I love the fact I've gotten to a point, and this happened a lot post corporate life, of really understanding and bringing more mindfulness in my life and being more present and really practicing the things I would go to conferences for, things on emotional intelligence and self-awareness and understanding the ego, that I felt very comfortable based on the relationship I built with my neighbor. He is my neighbor, that I was able to share it with him because it felt good to be able to say that. So not only do I think truly in order to really serve others, it's really helpful to realize how you can serve yourself. And that's a self-serving way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But also too is pursuing a career similar to what I did when I was a kid, of doing things I enjoy. I live the best of both worlds, because I stumbled after leaving my corporate career until I was doing some consulting, HR consulting, podcast production, but then finding an opportunity to paint houses, which I'd been painting since I was a kid and did it for a company when I was in college. The fact I was able to do that and then do it every day, there is no, that's like a blip. That moment I had at work today with that homeowner that I shared with him, and he was like, don't worry about it, man. And I love it. It's great. So I can't wait to go back tomorrow and work again. The the idea that I'm able to share that when it pops up, then it goes away. Then I'm right back to being me. So,
But I'm going to dive into your college, your marriage a little bit just for a brief second.
look at
Um,
that.
well,
Where's the couch, buddy?
it takes, first off, it takes a lot to be married for as long as you've been married.
Mhm.
So kudos on that. That's a big give and take. But it also takes a very strong partner when you're an entrepreneurial type and you're an artist type.
Mhm.
Some would label us as a flighty type because
Yeah.
we're bouncing from here to there to do there. It takes a very strong partner, especially when you're getting married at a young age, to see in you the quality that's going to sustain, because sweeping at a theater isn't probably her top list of what you do for a job. You know, sculpting may or may not have been bringing in enough money to sustain a family. Women like to nest and procreate and have families.
Mhm.
Those weren't really elements that stood out and said, Nick's a really solid catch. Let me reel that one in. So there's something in her that stood enough by you to see the future with you. So kudos to her, but also kudos to her, your mother-in-law, for also seeing it, because it's not incumbent upon parents to take in people who we don't think are going to be sustaining for our children.
I always joke with her on that one. I mean, I'd met them. The first time I met them was at my senior show, and I'm dressed up like an artist, my corduroy pants and I think I had a collared shirt on. I don't even know what I was wearing. I don't think I had any dress clothes in college. I mean, I went to college in the 90s. It was all about flannels and Doc Martin boots and Birkenstocks. It was heavy layers. It was,
Yeah.
so weird. And they, my father-in-law was a very short man. And I swear I I just thought my father-in-law was like 6'2". That was one of the biggest shocks when I saw him. I'm like, get out of here. That can't be him. And I met them. They came to see my show. One of my pieces was a woman sunbathing topless on the beach, and she had her top was off, and everything was painted in detail. And one of the things my mother-in-law told my wife when Megan told her that was, "It better not look like you." That's what she said. And it was great. They had some fun at my expense. I got this. We went out to dinner afterwards. I got the boyfriend test. That was funny. I had an earring at the time. I think one of the ones is, do you have an earring? I had an earring. And that was the start of the relationship I had with my mother-in-law. And then when I moved in with them 2 years later, after doing this door-to-door stuff and popping in maybe once or twice for some holidays over that period of time, and weighing close to nothing. Like when I was 23, I looked like I was 13. I just was malnourished, and the energy wasn't right, and I was unhealthy, very, very unhealthy. The fact that they took me in, and I didn't really understand. There's a lot of things I even teach people now is, when good things happen to you, you deserve it. There's a lot of, these people that push things away. I make it a point. I used to not do this, but anytime someone offers me anything when I'm working in their home, I take it. I don't care what it is. Hi, would you like a hot chocolate in the middle of the summer? Sure. Take it. Thanks. I mean, I live in a town with the Italian cuisine is aplenty. I mean, I'll walk away with pepperoni bread and sausage and peppers and all this stuff, because you have to almost say out loud, yes, I deserve good things, because with my childhood and how it went, I thought that that's what I deserve.
Mhm.
But that trauma is what I deserve. And not until I live with my in-laws, and Megan, which that was tough. That wasn't easy for her. And started seeing how a family unit functioned, a proper family unit functioned. I used to wash dishes with my mother-in-law. My wife and my father-in-law would cook, and then I would spend time in the kitchen with my mother-in-law, and we would wash dishes for like 2 hours. It's awesome. So awesome. Like awesome. Just talking and realizing some of the problems I had with my dad, she had with her dad. And I just actually last weekend painted her ceiling. She's looking to move she has a plaster home. There was some damage in her ceiling, and I painted it for her. Just being around her just that last Sunday. My father-in-law passed in 2000, so she's a widow, and I know I do a lot of work with widows that had husbands that did a lot of stuff around the house. So I'm glad they trust me to welcome me in their home, and I'm able to help them. And just being there with my mother-in-law and providing company and talking, I'm not your normal house painter. I can build a pretty strong relationship with my customers, like, because that's why I do it. I don't do it to paints the fun part of, like, kind of like the cherry on top. The whole Sunday is just being there and being welcome in their home, and the things I learn about myself while I take on these pretty amazing projects, sometimes things I've never done before that I have to figure out on my own. So it's pretty much what I do in my painting business has been my entire life, this ebbs and flows of all that. But having a mother-in-law like that, it's starting there, and believing that I deserve to have people that love me back, that is a gift that some people, you got to wake up being grateful for that every day, like every day. I mean, when someone calls me to ask me if I give them an estimate, I shower them with gratitude, something that's small. And I call them back on time, which, by the way, if you're ever looking to get into the trades, anyone listening to this, all you got to do is call people back, man. That's all you got to do.
Yeah.
99% of the people don't call people back.
It's funny. We're having some irrigation work done on our yard out here in the desert. It's 115 and our plants need to be watered. I don't like running out there with a bucket. And we called 5 people for estimates. They all scheduled a time. Only 2 of them showed.
I have done that, Daryl, 3 times out of the hundreds of times I've done it. And I felt terrible, like terrible.
But they didn't even call to say we're not coming.
That's just crazy. It's such a waste. I mean, I had one person, they like rearranged their schedule for me to be there.
Yeah.
And when I was on a job, I was so focused on doing the job, I completely forgot. Now I pull my phone out, Daryl, and I'll say, like, if I have an estimate tomorrow at noon, I set an alarm for 11 a.m. and set a reminder to tell me at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
It's just a better way of administering myself. Cause I started a painting company, but it's just me. I needed a relief. I don't manage anyone anymore. It's just me, and I'm trying my best to manage my time. And
I told my wife, I said, I said, I'm glad that they eliminated themselves. I didn't have to make the choice.
Yeah, I did. I know it's a weird way of saying it too. On the flip side of it too, if there's someone that I just maybe kept playing phone tag with, it's just the universe telling me maybe that's not supposed to happen. Like, that's really not supposed to happen.
So I'm curious before you move forward, because I had my own alchemist journey last year. I came through.
Great book, man. Great book. Great book.
Fantastic book. And I went through it on my own self-healing journey last year. And I really got to forgive my mother for the damage that she did to my life.
Yeah. It's crazy, right?
But it's the reason I mention that is because I realized through forgiving her, I don't condone what she did to us, but I understand. But I also look back at, she was only doing what her dad did to her, and she's passed it on down. And a lot of trauma is generational. It is passed down through generations. It sounds like you have broken that generational. So how is your relationship with your children?
It's before I answer that, I'm not going to say what you just said is wrong, but I think it's a pseudo cop out, because it's easy to say with anything, even the way a husband may treat his wife, because how he saw that doesn't make it right. Like, I think there has to be some type of clarification. to say that I just think that's the absolute easy way out. That I'm just going to repeat what was done to me, whether or not it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just going to do
Well,
the same thing.
in what I see, and especially in our
No, you're right, though.
um,
Again, I'm not
no,
saying
no,
it.
no, no, no,
Yeah,
no,
you're
no,
not
no.
wrong.
I'm not arguing the point with you, but I'm clarifying the difference is that my mother isn't willing to go inward to address her traumas.
Oh no. Well, that's
She'd rather
yeah,
she'd rather put her head in the sand and bury
sure.
it. And someone asked me, are you close with your mom? No. How can I be close with someone who's superficial and
Yeah,
doesn't go deep?
I agree
If
with you.
you're not willing to go deep, if you can never broach the subject of what was causing the pain, how
Yeah,
can you ever fix the pain?
correct.
So it's a blind eye, but it's an excuse that people they remain the victim of their story. They
Correct.
don't want to become the victor of their story because that takes work
And
and
responsibility.
and
Yeah,
responsibility. Yeah.
yeah.
And when you take responsibility and ownership, then you become the victor of your story, not the victim of your story. And
Mm,
not many people are willing to do the four-letter word that they all hate, work. They hate to do the work. So I'm asking you, how did
sure.
you break that cycle that is common? And how's your relationship with your kids?
My relationship with my kids is awesome. I I wouldn't say I went through parenting saying I'm going to do the exact opposite. Unfortunately, actually, fortunately, the opposite was just a better way. It was either complete total neglect or actually being fully engaged. So fully engaged. As the kids have gotten older, my daughter is 18. She's going to college, starting her field hockey season in about a month, and my son's 16, playing golf every day. And we always joke, hopefully, maybe he'll get a scholarship. We want him to go to an Ivy League school on a golf scholarship, just
Nice
to squeeze by and get it like a degree from Cornell or something,
aspirations.
playing golf. Yeah, he's not. I don't know if
Nice.
Nate is. I don't think he gets excited for the classroom, so I don't believe that just throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at a college education for him. I don't know how it would be maximized. Not to say he's not worthy of it, but I think now it's actually exciting because now he's 16 going into his junior year. And now I'm curious to see what he really wants to do. Uh, but being fully engaged with my kids, and I could say, Megan, we've talked a lot now that the kids are older about how much I missed when I was working corporate. I really excelled in my career because I put the time in. I know a lot of people give, and I want to answer that question, but I want to say this. I know a lot of people give CEOs a lot of crap where a CEO makes like $14 million a year, right? Let's say, for instance, and just to clarify, they don't make $14 million a year in salary. They don't, that's not how it works. I wrote paperwork for every CEO I brought in to that big company I worked for in the late 2000s. $1 million was their salary. That was it. 1 million. They made $580 a minute or something, or an hour or something like that. It was ridiculous. So, but what they got is they got restricted stock. They got value from the company, the performance goals, bonuses, all these things. But when you want a job like that and they compare it to someone who works just like 4 or 5 hours a day, that is like comparing life on Jupiter and life on Earth. Even though it's the same company, it's completely apples to alien oranges, because to be a CEO requires you to be something 24 hours a day, whether or not you like it or not. And even though I wasn't a CEO and I was usually the most senior HR person at any company I worked for, it required a lot from me. It required a lot because I got compensated for that. And I mean, I got compensated, and it required responsibility, that work you talked about, right? But it took me away from my family.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew excuse me, as a provider. Oh, I know something I'm going to share with you. Bring us right back. Actually, this is important. I want to share this with you. It it was difficult for me not to be at work when I was at home. That was really hard. But
Mm-hmm.
I just looked at it as that's just the sacrifice you had to pay, right, to be able to provide. Because I only looked at myself as a provider. And as I've gotten older, especially even becoming an entrepreneur and realizing when I decided to, big midlife crisis in 2018 on a cruise ship, deciding that I don't think I want to do this anymore, it opened me up to say, well, I can spend more time with my kids. And there's this moment on Facebook My sister-in-law took a photograph. We've gone on 2 cruises, and I prefer to be on cruises with people much older than me. It's way more laid back, way more laid back. We went on this
Mm.
Alaskan cruise, saw the glaciers, fished for salmon, just went on zip lines, all this cool stuff, and all these excursions. And there's this photograph. They would sell hot chocolate when you went and looked through the glaciers on the deck of the ship, and you can get a little Irish Bailey's Irish cream thrown in your hot chocolate. That was always great too. But there's a scene where I'm talking to my son, and my son's sitting there and he's talking to me, and I'm leaning on a railing listening to him. And I swear to God, that's got to be the most present I've ever been with my kids starting at that moment. I never understood till that moment how important it is. And the great thing about it is it was easy for me because I was blocked off from work. My cell phone didn't work out there. No one could reach me. I was truly present. It was just a taste of what I would encounter for the next 6 years after that up till now. And being with the kids, I enjoy seeing my children. This is fun. No one's ever asked me this. No one, I've never answered this on a show or in a journal. This is cool. So you're hearing it first. I mean, I'm sure people have opinions of what they see of my wife and I, of how we parent our kids. That I like to see how they become as they learn how to become independent, because I'm a big believer. I mean, my independence started at a very young age, but I believe success as a parent lies in a way of teaching our children, you can depend on yourself. You don't need to depend on me. I started using this thing with the kids is when they started doing things really, really well, and they played soccer for high school, and he played club, and now he plays golf, and Abby was a dancer and she plays field hockey, and these kids excel in all these activities. Rather than saying this specific thing, hey, I'm really proud of you, I don't say that. I say you should be really proud of yourself. I never want my children to think that they need, because remember, I told you that this, even though it allowed me to learn how to serve others, deep down, that's some damage of me trying to get validation and attention from others based on doing. I mean, I excelled in my career because deep down I was like, someday my dad's going to say he loves me, which will never happen ever. But that was driving it. And I don't want my kids to find success through that kind of unhealthy means. I mean, it's worked out for me, but it's not like there's obviously a better way of doing something. So I always tell the kids, you should be really, really proud of yourself. If they can find that pride within themselves. And now I've learned actually to do that with myself. Like when I do a job, a good job, a painting job, and which is great about painting is I get to see the results of my work. In HR, it's sometimes a thankless job. You don't get to see what happens. The unfortunate things, when 100 people needed to be laid off in a day, I saw that. But the other stuff, it was tough to see because it was too intrinsic. But for the kids to feel that way and find that excitement, and it's tough because you go from being the kids that look at you for advice and guidance all the time to you're only one part of that, which is ironic because that's the same way in my life. I have so many people I lean on to for help, and I'm here, I'm present 100%. And I will let the kids know, like I will definitely let the kids know when I'm not present. I'm vocal enough and they know it. And I'm sure they're tired of hearing daddy with his talking about the universe and, all these great things that happen to us when we share a lot more compassion than judgment in the world. And I can definitely say my wife, being who she is and what she's done for the kids since the kids were home with her till now is exponential to what I do. I think when Abby turned 18, I kind of went up to her and I said, I don't think I really did anything. And she had to look at me like, shut up. Yeah, you did. So that's what's really exciting. Like, has it been perfect or our kids made mistakes? One thing I really like about my son is my son has made mistakes before, but the kid never makes an excuse he never blames anybody. He owns up to it. It's so impressive. God, I respect my son. He's probably one of the most highly respected people on the planet.
But that comes from,
and he's 16. I
but
don't
that
know.
that comes from dad. And I can tell you this. My father, he adopted my sister and I when he married my mom. He's been my father. He passed away about 5 years ago, but he's been the only hero I've ever had in my life. And he always said, it is my job to make you a self-sufficient adult. to survive on your own.
Yeah.
And he actually even had a rule that when we turned 21, we were only allowed 2 suitcases in 2 weeks at a time. We were never moving back in. But that's the independence.
Yeah.
And teachers hated parent teacher conferences with me because whenever you go to parent teacher conference, they always want to just whip out the grade
Yeah.
book and show you where
Yeah.
kids are. And I told every one of them, I don't give a shit about your grade book. Did my kid give their best effort? Because if
Yeah.
they got an A and skated through like I did,
Mhm.
they didn't do nothing. But if they got a C and gave their best, kudos to my kid, right? I don't care about your grade book. So what you're teaching your kid is highly valuable to find self-worth in themselves. And the other thing you said about time, when I was in real estate, I just recently stepped away, but I was in real estate for 7 years. I worked for a company where we actually had to clock our time for the first time ever.
Mhm.
Most realtors never have to clock their time.
Mm.
The regular 9 to 5 job is 2,080 hours per year.
Correct. Yep. 2080, man. Yep.
That year that I had to clock, and I didn't get to clock everything, just what they allowed me to clock, I've clocked in over 2,700 hours. And it was the first time my eyes were open to how much I was giving
Oh,
to the
time. Yeah.
company
Yeah.
instead of my family.
And then it's
You
so funny, Daryl, not to stop my HR
know,
hats here. And you say that like, oh,
yeah,
did you, what were you non-exempt? They pay you overtime? Like, what's the deal, man? Like, could
yeah,
you go back and what were they doing it just to clock and track your time?
yeah.
How much, yeah.
We yeah, because
Accountability tool, I guess.
accountability tool,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So no, I didn't get overtime.
Well, you want, I mean, I don't even think real estate agents
Yeah,
fall under non-exempt work. Yeah.
no, yeah. So it
You
was
HR
just
nerds out there listening.
it was a bad example, and I look back at
No, it's good. Yeah.
how many dinners I left my wife at, and how many like New Year's Eve parties because I. And here's the part that really irritated me the most. My father was in his deathbed,
Mhm.
and I was sitting next to him, and he was projectile vomiting, and the nurses were having to clean him up.
Jeez.
And as he was doing that, I was having to pull out a laptop to write a contract for a client because
Daryl.
because
Daryl. Oh, man.
real estate doesn't care about a personal life.
Daryl.
It's the biggest regret I
So
have
much to unpack. Oh, my
is
gosh.
not,
Wow.
yeah, not sitting there with my father and allowing time for him to pass.
Yeah. Experience. Yeah. Wow. Oh, I'm
And
glad. I'm glad. I could say, sorry, I probably speak for a lot of people listening, but I'm glad you moved past that. I mean, I remember it was just weekends of anxiety, like bottling up that anxiety. And also, especially, I needed to show the world that I could deal with it. So hiding that and squashing that, I want my kids to understand, you were saying before, I'm always curious, like your advice you got from that was your stepdad, right?
my dad, but
Your
yes,
dad, your dad. Okay. Um, he said, when you're 21, you know, uh, you need to be self-sufficient. I'm just curious, like my kids are in and out as far as how well they verbally communicate. It's just different. They communicate in different ways. I'm sure we share more Instagram reels than we do conversations, which is fine. We had a family
yeah,
meeting tonight, actually, right before the show. Talk about a trip. And I'm just curious to see, like, maybe, 10 years from now, if my kids will say, hey, Dad, it was really cool. Excuse me. I think Nate actually said that once. Hey, it's really cool what you did, Dad. I started a painting business. I think once they experience adulthood a little
yeah.
bit, and not that I need it. Isn't that funny? Because that's like that weird way of validation. I'm just curious what they would say. I'm just curious if they'd say, yeah, it was really cool what you did, or Dad, it was really risky what you did. I'm just curious what their view is. And because they hear it from the outside, they hear what people think on the outside. And I know it, I'm
I'll tell you what,
always,
I mean, I'm not a soothsayer, but I will tell you what they'll say based on my own experience. Time is more precious to our children than anything else we can give them. And when you're fully engaged and fully present,
Mhm.
whatever else you do is really cool that you did it because you fit them in to
in
what
all
you do.
that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
So
Yeah. And then it's like twisting my son's arm. Hey, Nate, I need you to come to the job tomorrow.
eh,
I no, I did actually. My daughter, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was painting at a friend of ours who she knows, and she painted baseboards. Right, she must have saved me probably about 3.5 hours worth of time. And the irony is, the next day when I went back there, I was like thankful. I was totally bummed that she left. like
Mm.
totally bummed
Yeah.
because I was like, cool, I was sharing something. Like we
Yeah.
just sharing this, and she was crushing it. You're crushing it.
Yeah.
That's those are fun, but those are my memories, and that's what's so great. Good, bad, or
Well, when
indifferent. I
when
get to hold them.
I when I was working as a courier up in Minnesota when my daughter was younger, in the summers she used to ride with me,
Hmm.
and those days are still some of her favorite
That's fun.
memories
Yeah.
because we'd sing songs and we'd be silly and we'd hang out and we got to spend the time. And that picture that you have of time where you're actually present, I bet you that's going to be a memory your son cherishes for a very long time because we know as children how busy our parents are to keep us sufficient.
Yeah. And
And
we're vocal about that.
time, we know, especially for the entrepreneur, it's not a 9 to 5. It is a multi-hat. It is
Yeah.
extensive. And anything that you can be present in their life with is valued to them more than any gift we can give them.
My Daryl, my daughter playing field hockey. She's playing for Rowan University, a college not too far from here. My wife being a field hockey coach, very successful field hockey coach, and and with her, my daughter and I started antiquing together. So there's a
Mm,
few antique places. So we went into town and we were in the car, and she said the way she said it, I don't. There's not a lot of things. My kids' interests aren't mine. Like I've never been the person. And there's dads out there that I'm sure will try to live like, and moms too, want to live vicariously through their kids and kind of lean them towards things that they enjoy. But I like the fact my kids don't have the same interests that I have. So I get that my relationship with their experiences is that I get to see their joy in that. Doesn't have to be with me, but I get to see
mhm,
that. But one thing my daughter said that I had to share with my wife Megan is Abby had said, Mom and I have been on so many road trips over the last few years. They're driving to Virginia, they're driving to Western PA, they're driving all these places for a field hockey tournaments, and having that connection between there is it's a joy to watch. But it was so cool that my daughter actually said that out loud. Not that she didn't feel it, she just made sure she said it, and I made a big deal about it. I was like, Meg, man, yeah, I didn't get on those road trips. I mean, when they're away, it's so funny because Nate and I are here and we're just like, it's
yeah.
different without their energy in the house. The house is different. But having those memories, I think it's awesome. And now the fact that the school that Abby's going to is only 40 minutes away, we can attend all the home games, and Megan gets to see all of them, which is great too. Plus, by the way, it's so awesome. We have a really small town, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kids going and it's a local college, a very reputable college, and not expensive, but offers a lot of opportunity for the kids. All these kids are now leaving high school and going to Rowan with my daughter. And I'm so thankful that they're all these great kids, and we're such big fans of their parents. So now
Yeah.
we get to go to like all these events. I'm so thankful. Like I'm so thankful. Like now we get to see all these people that we really, and the kids are awesome. Like some of the kids aren't in her immediate social group, but we all know that, we know them. And now they're all going to connect and in college, which is going to be so much fun to see. All that, and it's going to be great. It's so exciting. So exciting.
But it's all about relationship building. And I know that you and I could talk for a long time. We got a lot to say and a lot of
Oh, we got to do
commonality.
part two. Yeah, we got to do
We got
part
to
two
do
of
a
this.
part 2. That and open door. You welcome to come back on anytime. But two things I want to ask you before we wrap this up.
Mhm.
For anyone listening out there, and I know that you are a podcaster, you're an entrepreneur, you're a husband, you're a father,
Mhm.
you're all around pretty good guy in the time that I've known you. No red flags. Uh,
That's funny there. You're all right.
uh,
You're all right, man.
you're all right,
You can be a
for a
terrible,
Jersey
evil
guy.
person when I'm not
Yeah,
on the phone with
for a Jersey guy.
you. We're
But
softies in South Jersey.
yeah, well, you're not a New Yorker or a Bostonian. I mean, like my wife, she's a Portuguese Bostonian, so it's a really combo. But my question is, and anyone listening to what we're saying tonight, and you want to transform your life from where you are to where you want to go, what would you advise them to do first?
Just tell yourself you can. Like, I just think so many people self-sabotage themselves when they look at their situation and say, and it could be anything different from where you are, because change is just simply going from what was to what has not been. That's it. And it happens daily. You do it when you drive somewhere. You do it when you walk in outside from inside. Everything is a change. And so we are pretty equipped to handle small changes. But big changes, we have that weird part of our lizard brain that just constantly protects us, because whatever we're doing right now in the constant way of things happening, it's safe. And the unfortunate thing is, Daryl, you could be in a really terrible relationship where you have an abusive partner or spouse. And unfortunately, it becomes the norm to you. And your brain is telling you that is safe because it is the norm for you. Just like I was raised in an environment where my parents weren't, my dad wasn't there. And I knew that, I thought that was normal until I got older and realized, no, that's not normal. And then I started getting, that's when I really started, the healing process began. But I had to choose that. I had to choose to accept that there is something different. You have to convince yourself that, yes, you can. And no matter what situation you're in. But my big thing is, and I have this thing, this buckets of change framework, the first bucket that I work with people that they need to fill, is all about permission. And I think not just deciding to change, but giving yourself permission to change and deal with all the bullshit that comes with it. When I decided to say, I'm going to throw away all the experience I had in a successful HR career that was very easy for me, I didn't have to look for work. People found me and paid me a lot of money to do something completely on my own. I had to give myself permission to disappoint people that love me. I had to give myself permission to be anxious. I had to give myself permission to cry. I had to give myself permission to be sad. I had to give myself permission to realize maybe I didn't do the right thing before. All these things that require you to almost say out loud, I give myself permission to do this. I do it daily when I paint. It's very ironic. I do a lot of social media content on my channels about the juxtaposition between how I change spaces and homes to how people change. And when I take on a big project and it looks great and I estimate it and they say yes and send me their deposit and I'm ready to go, I have to give myself permission to ache. I have to give myself permission to learn on the job and fail. I have to give myself permission to have to do something over and over again because I don't know what I'm doing. I have to give myself permission to go with the flow. All these things are imperative when people are on the cusp of deciding to introduce change. And most importantly, you look at the span of life we have. Wouldn't it be awesome if you can go through life and realize you made as many pivots as you possibly could? And again, finding even in those pivots happiness, because we want to find, no one can be happy all the time. I was on a podcast and someone said happiness is those small moments between all the suffering. And yes, life is hard. Life is difficult. But we used the word responsibility before. Are you someone that's going to just take responsibility for everything and accept it and just deal and get resilient and deal with that? Or someone that's just going to sit on your hands and let just time pass you by, which is fine, by the way. That's great. If that makes you happy, that's awesome. Because I'm in no way ever thinking that someone should make a change when their things are going great. Like that, why do that? But when there's a little bit more of life you can squeeze, a little bit more juice, why not give yourself permission to go through those things? And I think that, circling back, that self-sabotaging so many people, and there's too, Darren, how many times you're in a conversation with somebody and said, wouldn't it be cool if I did this? And you're looking at them like, yeah, it would be awesome. You'd crush it. And they go, well, I don't want to do that because then I have to do this and this and this. Boom.
Right.
And unfortunately, all that is, and I've dealt with it in being an entrepreneur, and I'm very aware of how my mind works now. All it is your mind saying, don't do that, because that's going to be unsafe. That's going to be unsafe because whether it's fear of success or failure, because they're both real things, you're either afraid the world's going to look at you differently if you fail, or if things go right, you're afraid of taking on all that responsibility and then meeting that expectation. Because even starting my painting business, I just wanted to pay bills.
Yeah.
I didn't want to build a giant painting empire, but the fact that suddenly when you start being good at something and being reputable and people like you as a house painter, your phone's going to ring more often.
Yeah.
And people are going to have higher demands for it. And that was I remember, I mean, I experienced that probably 3 years ago where I was like, oh, I got to do this now. This is like a thing.
Well, the changes, and you've probably heard this said before, when one door closes, another opens,
Hmm.
but it's that long hallway in between where the scary part happens,
Sure.
you know, and we
Can I
never
even
know how long
can I
that
even say
hallway is going
this
to
too,
be.
Daryl? I would almost look at it as, what if your hallway just had a bunch of open doors?
Mm,
And you could, and here's the thing too. I spoke at a teen summit a few weeks ago, talking to these high school students that are getting ready to graduate. Some of them are going to school on academics, some on sports, and some are just joining the workforce and getting their life started a little earlier than those folks going away to school. And one of the things I shared with all three sessions was, whatever choice you make after you graduate, making whatever educated, calculated choice that you make, you're never a prisoner to that choice.
pivot.
You're never a prisoner to that choice. When I chose HR and was good at it, there was a year and a half worth of time that I felt like I was a prisoner. Like I was like, I can't do anything else. I remember Megan reminded me of this, going through this bout of depression during my midlife crisis in 18. And this was years later. I had no, it came back to me when she said it, but Megan said, Nick, I remember you were on the porch just sobbing on the front porch. And I went up to you and I said, what's wrong? And I said, I can't, my work job and this and this, because I was at a very toxic organization too. It kind of all fell together. And she said, why don't you just quit? And I just looked at it and said, I can't. Now, not the fact that I can't, as in, well, I can't because it's going to take me to find something else. I just felt I could. How could you leave such a high paying,
Hmm.
perfect job?
Hmm.
And that was one of the things I struggled. But looking back and saying, I needed to give myself permission to say, I can do better than this, or give myself permission to be a little bit uncomfortable, if, and also, and most specifically, to disappoint others, and really actually permission to confuse people,
Well,
because
we're
I was
allowed
told,
to pivot, though. We're allowed to pivot.
I mean,
You,
as many times as you want, and
and,
it doesn't
and
have to be forever. You can
yeah,
taste things like my friends.
people don't give themselves permission to pivot. They think I put too much time, too much money, too much effort.
All right, well, there
Pivot.
you go.
Yeah.
Fine. I mean, that's fine. I just, if someone does that and they come to me and they complain about it all the time, I'd be the
Right.
first one to tell them, come on, man,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Like, you can't do that anymore. I'm going to tell you, you are not allowed to talk to me about your job anymore.
I
Sorry.
love it. The other thing that you were talking about, change, and when coaches and people
Yeah.
and whatever, they talk about change, they always talk about the butterfly and the caterpillar. The caterpillar transitions
Ooh,
into the butterfly.
interesting.
But what they
Interesting.
don't talk about, and this is
Yes.
the part that irritates me because they forget this part. If you study the caterpillar changing into the butterfly, they
Keep
have to
going.
go into a dark hole, into a
Yes.
cocoon, and they
Yes.
have to totally dissolve who they
It's
were,
yes.
transform into who they are. And if somebody comes along and tries to open that cocoon to make it easier for the butterfly to emerge, the butterfly's wings aren't strong enough and they die.
Mhm.
You have to go through the pain, do the work to strengthen your wings so you can fly. But you have to dissolve who you were to
Yeah.
become who you want to be.
Oh, I'm going to add to that. One is, that's really amazing you have that, because in one of my buckets I talk about that. There's a name for that, and I added it, and I apologize for not knowing the exact name of it. But what happens in that cocoon is, the chrysalis
Metamorphosis.
is, yeah, there's certain parts of that virtually turn to goo,
Yes,
but there's
yes.
certain parts, there's something in there that remembers, and
Mm,
something and there's certain, the circulatory system, like there's certain things that stay the same. And through all that massive amount of chaos, and how I usually teach that is that it's the chaos in it, like not
right.
only the pain, but there's absolute chaos. There's so much stuff that is just messy and
Hmm.
gross and whatever, that that is necessary in order
Hmm.
for the butterfly to do that. Now, I'm sorry, I got really
No,
excited when you started talking about that. What was the question again? Like
it wasn't a question. It was really just a
yes,
statement.
that was awesome. I mean, that fascinates me. I saw something on. They really got in there. Actually, I saw something. I think I might have even listened to it on a podcast. It was like, uh, if you opened it during that time, it'd be unrecognizable. Oh,
Right.
I'm sorry. That's what I wanted to add. The one thing I made a mistake in, and I've talked about this on my show, is when I left my career, I treated it like a girlfriend I didn't really like anymore and wanted to have nothing to do with. So I almost cut that off because of what I felt that created. I took the pain from that rather than looking at the good times and the things I learned, that I cut it off. And it took a few years for a mentor to say to me, why don't you say hi to that guy again?
Mm-hmm.
Which now I'm getting back into that, in that world that I was welcomed back in. I mean, I was part of some pretty big HR groups that I attended some meetings and they acted as if I never left. But I came as a different person. It was almost like that. Like I was a caterpillar before, and now suddenly I'm this butterfly. And maybe I ironically, look at those years where I was pushing my old HR head away,
Yeah.
that was the messiness. That was the time I needed to figure it out. But how exhilarating. I'm always a big fan of when you do pivot, you still bring a little bit of yourself, and never forget that,
Right.
because how strong you are, because you could take a little bit of this, little bit of this, little bit of this. Every pivot I made since the time I started telling you about my childhood, I take a little bit of that and a little bit of that. I might tell the story, but part that all makes me who I am.
Well,
Uh,
I can tell you when I was homeless, living out of my car and selling blood for gas money, I wasn't sitting there going, "Oh, geez, this is going to be a great lesson I can use down the road." But I can promise you, when I was helping people get their PhD, I was using those experiences to show them that they can get through their troubled times to get to where they want to go.
mhm.
And so you take those pieces, those lessons with you, and you do, bring them to your next level. And everything, good or bad, has brought you to where you are
Yeah.
today to use as a lesson. Speaking of lessons, I've learned that if I miss dinner with my wife, I'm going to be in big trouble. um, so I'm going to ask you one final question that I ask all my guests. Um, what does a warrior spirit or having a warrior spirit mean to you?
When I think of warrior, and I used to actually, I read a lot of books on Navy SEALs, and they consider themselves warriors. Uh, when you're a warrior or a soldier, sometimes it requires you to lead from the front. And leading in general is a very lonely place. And by leading, you have an opportunity to make the largest impact to the people around you. Now, I mean leading, not managing, not being a boss. I'm talking about leading, selfless leadership, servant leadership. I think the only way to truly do that is you have to be comfortable being lonely. And when you can find comfort in loneliness, it it will serve you better, because it can't be looked at as a punishment for leading. When I led a long time ago, the loneliness, I looked at it as a punishment. Like, oh, I got to this point and now, I can't have I can't have relationships with people, like, friendship relationships, because who knows who I'm going to be sitting across the table to let go, if I'm in that situation. I I looked at it as a punishment rather than looked at it as a time to reflect, at a time to really think, all right, again, and also giving myself permission to be lonely or feel lonely or alone, not lonely. Uh, and what can I do with the time that I have, that I am in this position, and believing that I am really serving others now versus aspiring to be that, to lead. Uh, that's exactly what I think a warrior spirit is.
I love it.
How do you like that, Daryl?
I
Huh? Put
like
that on
that
a
a lot.
t-shirt.
I got the printer ready. We'll get them out. Um, I love our time. We could talk for hours,
Rock and roll, buddy.
and we'll definitely do a part two open door policy, like I said.
Huh.
I know that this is time away from your family as well, and I appreciate everything that you did to
Sure.
make it here tonight.
Thanks, Daryl.
Thank you for joining me, and I hope you and your family have a really blessed night.
Thank you. Well, then everybody's sleeping. So how about
Yeah.
that?
Well, little blessed tomorrow.
Yeah.
All righty. Love you, brother.
Thanks, man.